Hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're new, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you like what you hear. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and let me know what you think of tonight's story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now get comfy, grab a glass of something strong. Whiskey if you're up for it. Grab a snack and buckle up. This one's going to be a ride. You're probably listening to this because you want to be a dogman hunter. Jesus Christ. Well, might as well get comfortable, because you need to hear this before you go getting yourself killed. Got my coffee here, my rifle within reach, same as any other night. Because that's the thing about this life, you're never really off duty. Let me guess. You've seen some videos online, read some stories, maybe even had your own weird experience out in the woods. Now you're thinking about hunting these things, thinking maybe you've got what it takes, thinking it might be exciting, might give your life some meaning. Truth is, you don't know what the hell you're asking for. Most of you probably call them werewolves. That's fine. Humans like putting neat labels on things they don't understand. Makes them feel better. We call them dogmen because that's what they are. Some can change, some can't. Some used to be human, some never were. Doesn't matter much when they're trying to tear you apart. What matters is understanding what you're really dealing with. This ain't some movie where silver bullets and full moons make everything simple. This is a war nobody knows is happening, fought in the dark places where normal folks don't go. A war that's been going on longer than any of us have been alive. And if you're really thinking about joining it, you need to know what it's going to cost you. I've been doing this for 15 years now. Lost friends, lost family, lost pretty much everything that makes a normal life normal. But I'm still breathing, still hunting. That makes me either one of the lucky ones or one of the crazy ones. Probably both. So settle in, got a story to tell you. More importantly, got some truth to share. Whether you can handle that truth, well, that's up to you. Let's start at the beginning. Back when I was just another construction foreman in Pennsylvania, living a nice, normal life. Back before I knew what was really out there in the dark. You know what's funny about this whole dogman hunting business? I never meant to get into it. Hell, most of us don't. We're just regular folks who had the misfortune of seeing something we weren't supposed to see. Something that changes everything. Name's Marcus Reed, and I've been hunting these bastards for 15 years now. Not the kind of career guidance counselors tell you about, that's for damn sure. But here I am, sitting in my cabin in northern Michigan, cleaning my custom-built 338 Lapua while I tell you this story. Before all this started, I had what you'd call a normal life. Construction foreman in Pennsylvania, making decent money overseeing warehouse builds. Had a girlfriend, Sarah, nice apartment in Pittsburgh, season tickets to the Steelers, your basic American setup. Weekends I'd hunt deer with my buddy Mike. We had this little camp up in Forest County, nothing fancy, just a place to get away from the city noise. Mike used to give me shit about my fancy gear. I was always buying the latest hunting gadgets, thermal scopes, trail cameras, you name it. Funny how all that stuff ended up being useful later, just not how I expected. It was 2008, November. We were behind schedule on this big warehouse project out near the Allegheny National Forest. Boss was riding my ass about deadlines, so I was pulling late nights doing paperwork in the site trailer. Real glamorous stuff. That particular night, man, I remember every detail like it was yesterday. Temperature had dropped into the low 30s. We had these big construction lights set up around the site, casting shadows everywhere. Rest of the crew had cleared out around 6, leaving me with just the hum of the generator for company. I'd been going over inspection reports for hours, mind-numbing shit. Probably why I almost missed it when things started feeling wrong. You know that feeling when the air gets heavy? Like right before a big storm? It was like that, but different, worse. Started noticing little things. Generator sound seemed to fade in and out, even though it was running fine. Shadows looked deeper than they should. Got this creeping sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching. The kind of feeling that goes straight back to caveman days, when being watched usually meant you were about to be dinner. Around 8:30, the generator hiccuped, just for a second. But in that moment of quiet, I heard something moving out there, something big. And here's the thing. I knew every sound those woods could make. Spent enough time hunting to know what bears sound like, what deer sound like, hell, even what bobcats sound like when they're creeping around. This wasn't any of those. The movement was too deliberate. You know how animals make noise when they walk? Snap twigs, rustle leaves. This thing was dead silent except for its breathing. Deep, hollow breaths that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I killed the lights in the trailer. Don't ask me why, instinct, I guess. Sat there in the dark, listening. That's when it happened. This sound started up. Began like a wolf's howl but turned into something else. Something that made every hair on my body stand up. Made me remember being a kid, convinced there was something under my bed. The construction lights outside were playing tricks with the shadows. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I'd see movement, look directly at it, nothing. Then movement somewhere else, like it was circling the trailer, testing. Remember that lunch cooler I mentioned? I'd left it sitting on top of the excavator earlier. Half a roast beef sandwich and some jerky inside. Wasn't thinking about it then. Kind of hard to think about lunch when your heart's trying to pound its way out of your chest. Something moved by the excavator. Big fucker. Dark as pitch, with a dog's head sitting on top of this thick, fur-covered body. Yellow eyes caught the light. And wouldn't you know it, hanging off its shoulders were the remains of somebody's red flannel shirt. That's the part that got me. Not the size, not the eyes, but that damn shirt. Because now my brain had to deal with something. It really didn't want to. This wasn't just some animal. My Glock 20 was sitting on the desk next to me. 10mm auto, my woods carry gun. Had always figured it was enough gun for anything I'd run into. Funny how fast your confidence in your gear disappears when you're face to face with something that shouldn't exist. I stayed absolutely still. Didn't move, barely breathed. Watched it tear into that cooler like it was made of paper. Whole time my hand was on that Glock. Wouldn't have done shit against something that size, but it made me feel better. 20 minutes, felt like 20 years. Then it just left. Melted into the dark like it had never been there. Only proof it wasn't all in my head was the destroyed cooler and the tracks in the mud. Next morning, tried telling the crew about it. They looked at me like I was nuts. Blamed the cooler on bears even when I showed them the tracks. Bears walk on their hind legs sometimes, they said. Wouldn't look at the prints that showed a stride twice as long as any bears. Wouldn't talk about the claw marks that were all wrong. That morning changed everything. Not just because of what I'd seen, but because of what happened next. See, once you've had something like that shake up your world, you've got two choices. Try to forget it ever happened, or dig deeper. I chose to dig. But that's another part of the story. One that needs something stronger than coffee to tell properly. Just remember this. If you're out in the woods, and you get that feeling, that deep down primal certainty that something ain't right, listen to it. Because your ancestors survived by knowing when they weren't at the top of the food chain anymore. And out there in the dark, we rarely are. All right, pour yourself something strong. This part ain't easy to tell. After that night at the construction site, I was a mess. Couldn't sleep. Kept seeing those yellow eyes every time I closed mine. Called in sick to work so many times they finally told me not to bother coming back. My girlfriend packed her shit and left. Said I was obsessed, that I needed help. Maybe she was right. Spent 3 weeks living off savings, doing nothing but research. Internet forums, library books, newspaper archives. Anything I could get my hands on. Most of it was bullshit, but every now and then I'd find something that rang true. A livestock killing that didn't make sense. A missing hiker case where they only found shreds of clothes. Little pieces that started forming a bigger picture. That's how I found Bill. Or really, how he found me. I was at this dive bar outside of Warren, Pennsylvania, talking to this old-timer about a case from the 70s. Hunter found torn apart during deer season. Few drinks in, I was probably running my mouth too much. Didn't notice the guy at the end of the bar watching me. Next day, there's a note under my windshield wiper. Just an address and a time. Normal people would have thrown it away. But by then, I wasn't exactly normal anymore. Bill's place was this old farmhouse way out in the sticks. Kind of place that's got dummy cameras covering the fake security cameras. Man himself? Picture every hardcore survivalist you've ever seen. Roll them all into one. Then add 30 years of hard living. First thing he did was test me. Made me tell my story 3 different times, watching for any changes. Then he started asking questions. Specific stuff about tracks, sounds, movements. Things I hadn't told anyone because I thought they'd make me sound crazy. When I mentioned the flannel shirt, he just nodded, like he was finally hearing something he expected. "Congratulations," he says. "You're not insane. But you're going to get yourself killed if you keep stumbling around in the dark." That's when he took me down to his basement. Jesus, place was like a military bunker. Guns, cameras, maps covered in pins and notes. Filing cabinets full of reports going back to the 1950s. Turned out Bill had been tracking these things for almost 40 years. Started back when he was a game warden and found something eating deer in ways that didn't make sense. First thing you gotta understand, he told me, is that everything you think you know about hunting is wrong. These aren't animals. They think, they plan, and they're a hell of a lot smarter than any bear or mountain lion. Training started the next day. Bill had me move into his guest room. Didn't want me driving back and forth. Said it wasn't safe. Looking back, I think he just wanted to keep an eye on me. Make sure I wasn't going to crack up. 6 months of the hardest learning I've ever done. How to track something that knows it's being tracked. How to tell the difference between regular animal signs and something pretending to be regular animal signs. How to move silent, even with 50 pounds of gear. How to shoot from awkward positions in low light. Bill had this obstacle course set up in the woods behind his house. Made me run it blindfolded until I could do it without making a sound. They hunt by sound first, he'd say. Then smell, then sight. You gotta deny them all three. The guns came later. Started with that .338 Lapua I mentioned. Custom build, cost more than my truck. Bill made me clean it and reassemble it 100 times before he'd let me fire it. This isn't about shooting, he'd say. It's about knowing your tool better than you know yourself. Funny thing about Bill, he never talked about his own encounters. Not directly. But some nights after training, he'd sit on his porch with a bottle of wild turkey and start telling stories. About friends he'd lost. About hunts that went wrong. About the ones that got away. There was this one story he told about a hunter up in Maine who thought he had everything figured out. Top-of-the-line gear, years of experience hunting bears, found him scattered across half an acre of forest. Overconfidence kills more hunters than anything else, Bill would say. Then he'd go quiet, staring into the dark like he was seeing ghosts. By month 4, we were doing actual tracking. Bill had a network of trail cameras set up across 3 counties. When something showed up, we'd go investigate. Never saw one of the big bastards during those trips, but I learned to read the signs. Learned what it meant when we found deer carcasses buried under leaves. Learned to spot territorial markings on trees. That's another thing Bill taught me. They're territorial as hell. Mark their boundaries just like wolves, but they do it 8 feet up the trunk. And they're creatures of habit. Once they claim an area, they stick to it, unless something forces them out. Month 5, Bill introduced me to others. Hunters who'd stopped by his place for supplies or information. Each one had their own stories, their own scars. Some were ex-military, some were just regular folks who'd had encounters like mine. All of them had this same look in their eyes, like they'd seen behind the curtain and couldn't quite deal with what they'd found there. There was this one guy, Travis came through in March, missing 3 fingers on his left hand. Told me it was from his first hunt gone wrong. Tried to draw my backup pistol, he said. Learned real quick that if your first shot doesn't do the job, you probably won't get a second. Bill used every visitor as a teaching opportunity. Had me listen to their stories, learn from their mistakes. Knowledge stays alive through sharing, he'd say. Every hunter who dies without passing on what they know makes us all a little weaker. By month 6, I thought I was ready. Had the gear, had the training, had enough knowledge to fill a book. Boy, was I wrong. But that story, my first real encounter, that's gonna take another glass to tell properly. You want to know the really fucked up part? Looking back, those 6 months with Bill were some of the best of my life. Had purpose, you know. Everything was clear, black and white. There are things in the dark that need to be stopped, and somebody's got to stop them. Reality turned out to be a lot messier. But that's the thing about this life. By the time you figure out what you're really getting into, you're already in too deep to turn back. This part's always the hardest to tell. Had some guys ask me over the years about their first kill. They all want to hear about glory and triumph, about being a badass. Truth is, your first kill is mostly about fear and luck. Mostly fear. Like I said before, it happened up in Potter County. October 2009. I'd been training with Bill for 6 months. Thought I knew what I was doing. Funny how life has a way of showing you just how wrong you are. Started with a call from one of Bill's contacts, local farmer named Jim Whitaker. Guy had lost 3 cows in a week, not eaten, just destroyed. Found them scattered across his back field like something had been playing with them. Playing mean. Bill and I had been tracking similar kills across the county. Patton was moving north, following the ridgeline. Whatever was doing it wasn't hunting for food. This was something else, something worse. We set up camp in Jim's back 40, old hunting cabin he hadn't used in years. Spent the first 2 days just watching, learning the land. Bill had taught me that. You don't just charge in. You learn the terrain, find the escape routes, figure out where it's likely to come from. Found the usual signs, claw marks on trees 8 feet up, broken branches, weird tracks that looked almost human but weren't. Bill said this one was big. Maybe the biggest I've seen, he told me. Didn't exactly help my nerves. Third day, Bill had to head into town. Our generator had crapped out, and we needed a new one. Temperatures were dropping into the 20s at night. Couldn't risk our equipment batteries dying. He left me at camp with strict instructions. Maintain radio contact every hour. Keep the fire going. Don't do anything stupid. You know what's weird about remembering traumatic shit? How some details stick with you while others fade. I remember exactly what I was eating when it all started. Beef jerky and cold beans. Remember the brand of jerky too. Jack Link's. Teriyaki flavor. Funny what your brain holds onto. It was around midnight. Moon was full, thank Christ, or I wouldn't have seen half of what happened. I heard what sounded like a woman screaming. Not like a horror movie scream, like someone in real pain. The kind of sound that hits you in the gut. Bill had warned me about this, showed me recordings of how they mimic sounds to lure people in, even knowing it was a trap though. That sound does something to your brain. Makes you want to help. I got on the radio, nothing but static. Tried my satellite phone, same thing. That's when I knew this wasn't random. This thing had been watching us, learning our patterns, waiting for Bill to leave. Remember that 338 Lapua Bill had given me? Had it loaded with custom rounds, copper-jacketed hollow points filled with powdered silver. Don't ask me where Bill got them. Some things it's better not to know. I did everything by the book at first. Got my gear on. Plate carrier, night vision monocle, the works. Checked my backup piece. Ruger Super Redhawk, .454 Casol. Kind of overkill for most situations. Exactly what you want for this work. The screaming had stopped, but I could hear something moving in the woods, moving toward the cabin. That's when I made my first mistake. I stepped outside. See, Bill had taught me about defensive positions, about picking your ground and making them come to you. But in that moment, all that training, it just kind of slipped away. I was running on instinct, and my instincts were all wrong. Found myself on this old logging road about 100 yards from the cabin. Moon was bright enough that I didn't need the night vision. That's when I heard it, breathing, right behind me. People talk about time slowing down in moments like that. They're wrong. Time doesn't slow down. You speed up. Your brain starts processing everything at once. The sound of your own heartbeat, the way the air moves. The smell. God, the smell. Like wet dog and rotting meat. Turned around slow, bringing the rifle up. There it was, maybe 20 feet away. Dark shape, yellow eyes. Moving like... You ever see those videos of big cats stalking prey? That kind of fluid motion, but all wrong because something that big shouldn't be able to move that quiet. First shot caught it in the shoulder. 338 Lapua, hitting with about 4,500 foot-pounds of energy. Should have dropped it right there. Instead, it just staggered. Made this sound, not a howl, not a roar. Like metal being torn apart. Second shot went wide. My fault, I rushed it. It was closing the gap fast, moving in this weird zigzag pattern. Third shot hit center mass. That's when things got really weird. See, Bill had told me about what happens when you kill one. Told me about the changes. But knowing about something and seeing it are two different things. Fourth shot, headshot, dropped it right there on the logging road. As it died, it shifted, got smaller. Fur seemed to sink back into the skin. By the time I got my flashlight out, it looked almost human. Almost. Still had those yellow eyes, though. Still had those teeth. I threw up. No shame in admitting it. Then I did what Bill had drilled into me. Poured accelerant, lit it up. Can't leave evidence. World's not ready for this kind of truth. Bill found me sitting by that fire at dawn. Took one look at me and knew. Just handed me his flask and sat with me until the fire burned out. That's when he really started teaching me. Not just about hunting them, but about living with what we do. Because that's the thing they don't tell you about killing monsters. Part of you becomes a monster too. You have to do this job. The trick is not letting that part take over. You know what's really fucked up? That wasn't even the scariest one I've dealt with. Not by a long shot. But it was the one that changed me the most. Because after that night there was no more pretending this was just a job or a mission. This was my life now. And it still is. That first kill in Potter County changed everything. Thought I knew what I was getting into after 6 months with Bill. Truth is, I didn't know shit. Real education was just starting. Bill stuck with me for another year after that night. Said he needed to make sure I wouldn't get myself killed. Looking back, I think he was really making sure I wouldn't lose my mind. Happens to more hunters than you'd think. Something about knowing what's really out there. It breaks some people. We worked as a team, covering territory from northern Pennsylvania up into New York. Bill had this whole network of contacts. Farmers, game wardens, cops who knew the score. When something weird happened, they'd call. Most times it was nothing. Regular animal attacks, sometimes just paranoid people seeing shadows. But every now and then, remember that mean bastard from Potter County? The one that liked tearing up cattle? Turned out that was just the tip of the iceberg. See, what most people don't understand is that these things, they've got different types, different behaviors, like wolves versus coyotes versus dogs, except the differences are bigger, meaner. Some of them are territorial, stick to their hunting grounds, only kill what they need to eat. Others are nomads, moving through areas causing all kinds of hell. Then you've got the real problem cases, the ones that seem to enjoy it, the ones that hunt humans for sport. Had my first run-in with one of those in the Adirondacks, winter of 2010. 3 hikers had gone missing over 2 months. Rangers found pieces of them scattered across different trails. Made it look like animal attacks, but the spacing was too perfect, too planned. Bill and I spent 2 weeks up there camping in negative temperatures, tracking this thing. Found its den in an old mine shaft. Place was like a museum of horror. Clothes, gear, personal effects going back years. This thing had been hunting people for longer than I'd been alive. Took both of us to bring it down. Biggest one I'd ever seen. Made the Potter County beast look like a pup. But it was smart, knew how to set traps, how to use terrain to its advantage. Nearly got Bill when it collapsed part of the mine on us. That hunt taught me something crucial. These things learn. They adapt. Every time we kill one, the others get smarter. Bill took a bad hit during that fight. Claws caught him across the back, tore him up pretty good. He healed up, but it was never quite the same. Started talking about retiring, moving somewhere warm. Can't blame him. This life takes a toll on you, body and soul. By 2011, I was working solo most of the time. Bill would still coordinate, still handle intel, but the field work was mine. Started expanding my territory, learning new hunting grounds. Each area has its own challenges. Mountains are different from forests, are different from swamps. Had to adapt, learn new techniques. That's when I really started understanding what Bill meant about this being more than just hunting. It's like, imagine you found out that everything you knew about the world was just the surface. That underneath all our civilization, all our technology, there's this whole other reality. One where we're not at the top of the food chain. Met others like me during those years, hunters working their own territories, dealing with their own nightmares. There's no official network, no organization, just people who've seen too much to go back to normal life. We help each other when we can, share information, keep each other alive. Some of them had different methods. Met this guy in Vermont, Jack, who used military tactics. Teams, proper gear, the works. Effective but expensive. Plus, more people means more chances for things to go wrong. I preferred working alone. Easier to move quiet. Easier to make quick decisions. Lost some good people over the years. Sarah, not my ex, different Sarah, was a hunter out of Ohio. Smart, careful, had been doing this for 5 years. Something got her in 2013. Never found enough to know exactly what happened. That's the thing about this work. Sometimes people just disappear. Then there was Mike from Michigan. Former Force Recon, tough as they come. Got cocky after a few successful hunts. Started taking risks. Found him and his spotter in the UP, or what was left of them. Another lesson learned. Doesn't matter how good you are, how well armed you are. Get overconfident in this line of work, you die. By 2015, I had a system down. Different weapons for different situations. Learned that the Lapua wasn't always the best choice. Sometimes you need something faster, something you can move with. Started using a custom AR-10 in 338 Federal for close work. Not as much power, but better in tight spaces. Got better at reading signs too. These things, they've got patterns, ways they mark territory, ways they hunt, ways they communicate. Started keeping detailed records, trying to understand their behavior. Because knowledge keeps you alive. Found out they're most active during certain moon phases. Learned that they avoid areas where one of their own has been killed, at least for a few months. Discovered that they seem to have some kind of hierarchy, especially in areas where multiple ones operate. Weather affects them too. They're more aggressive before storms, more likely to take risks when it's overcast. UV light bothers them. They'll avoid areas with certain types of floodlights. Little details that make the difference between a successful hunt and a body bag. The hardest lesson, learning when not to hunt. Sometimes you track something for days, get everything set up perfect, and then you realize the situation isn't right. Maybe the terrain's wrong, maybe you're not at 100%, maybe something just feels off. Those are the times you back off, live to hunt another day. Bill taught me that before he retired to Arizona in 2016. The best hunters, he'd say, are the ones who know when to walk away. Took me years to really understand what he meant. This isn't about glory or revenge. It's about survival, yours and other people's. Started training others myself around 2017. Not many, maybe 1 or 2 a year. Most don't make it past the first few months. It's not the danger that gets them, it's the isolation, the knowledge. Hard to have a normal life when you know what's really out there. Some of them are still out there hunting. Good people, doing necessary work. Others, well, let's just say this life isn't for everyone. Had to put down one of my own trainees in 2019. Guy snapped, started thinking he was becoming one of them. Was going to expose everything, put a lot of good people at risk. Not proud of what I had to do, but this life, sometimes it demands hard choices. That's the real cost of this work. Not the physical danger, not the isolation, but the choices you have to make. The lines you have to cross. Every hunter deals with it differently. Some drink, some get religious, some just get hard. Me? I focus on the lives we save, on the families that never have to know what's really out there in the dark. Because that's what it comes down to in the end. We're not heroes. We're not warriors. We're just the thin line between the world everyone knows and the world we've seen. The world of yellow eyes in the darkness, of tracks that shouldn't exist, of creatures that hunt us for sport. And yeah, maybe we're a little crazy. Maybe you have to be, to do this job. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to know the truth. Has to be ready to act when things go bump in the night. That's what 15 years in this life has taught me. That's what I'm trying to pass on to those who might follow this path. Because the threats aren't going away. If anything, they're getting worse. More sightings, more incidents, more territories being marked. Which brings me to the part you've probably been waiting for. How to get into this life yourself. But that's going to take some serious discussion. Because if you're really thinking about this path, you need to understand exactly what you're getting into. So you want to be a dogman hunter. Been watching you people hanging on every word of my story. Thinking about how you'd handle it better. Thinking maybe you're tough enough, smart enough, crazy enough to do this job. Let me tell you something straight up. Half of you won't make it through this talk. Half of what's left won't make it through training. And half of those that do, well, they won't make it through their first year. That's not me being dramatic. That's 15 years of watching people try this life and fail. Or die. First thing you need to understand, this isn't a hobby. This isn't something you do on weekends between barbecues and football games. This is all in, all the time. Kiss your normal life goodbye. Family, friends, relationships, all that gets put on hold. Because once you start down this road, there's no going back. Let's talk gear. Everyone wants to know about weapons, about the sexy stuff. Fine. Here's what you need to know. Forget everything you think you know about hunting. Your deer rifle? Useless. Your tactical shotgun? Might as well be throwing rocks. Minimum caliber for this work is .338. Lapua's best, but Federal works if you're moving in tight spaces. Forget about 5.56 or .308. Might as well be using BBs. These things can take hits that would drop a grizzly and keep coming. Silver content in your rounds matters. Don't ask me why. That's above my pay grade. Just know it works. But here's what nobody tells you. The weapon doesn't matter nearly as much as what's between your ears. I've seen guys with $15,000 worth of gear get torn apart because they couldn't read signs, couldn't track, couldn't think 3 steps ahead. You need to learn tracking. Not the basic shit they teach in hunting classes. Real tracking. Spending days following signs that most people wouldn't even notice. Learning to tell the difference between regular animal behavior and something pretending to be regular animal behavior. Weather becomes your Bible. You need to know how rain affects tracks, how wind changes scent patterns, how moonlight plays with shadows. Because these things? They know all that instinctively. You've got to learn it the hard way. Territory is everything. These aren't random encounters. They're hunting grounds. Each area has its own challenges, its own patterns. Mountains need different tactics than forests. Swamps are their own special kind of hell. You need to learn them all. Then there's the psychological stuff. Nobody talks about this part, but it's what gets most people. The isolation, the paranoia, the way this job changes how you see everything. You'll never look at the woods the same way again. Never feel safe in the dark. Never be able to hear a strange noise without your hand moving toward your weapon. You need a cover story. Something to explain your absences, your weird hours, your injuries. Most of us go with freelance work or consulting. Something vague enough that people don't ask too many questions. You'll lose friends over it, lose relationships. Some lose their minds. Money's another thing nobody talks about. This ain't a paid gig. No government funding, no secret organization backing you up. You need a way to support yourself that gives you flexibility. Some hunters do security work. Others have online businesses. Me? I do consulting for wildlife management. Close enough to the truth to remember my cover story. Equipment's expensive. Custom weapons, specialized ammo, gear that can take abuse. It adds up quick. You need reliable transportation, backup equipment, medical supplies. And you can't exactly claim any of it on your taxes. Speaking of medical, you better learn field medicine. Real medicine, not just first aid. Because when something goes wrong out there, you're on your own. No hospitals, no ambulances. Can't exactly explain claw marks that don't match any known animal. Communications are critical. You need redundant systems, satellite phones, emergency beacons, radios. When these things hunt you, and they will hunt you, first thing they do is try to isolate you. Cut off your contact with others. You need backup plans for your backup plans. Here's something else they don't tell you. This job changes your body chemistry. Adrenaline becomes your normal state. You'll develop insomnia, hypervigilance, stuff that looks a lot like PTSD. Because it is PTSD, you're fighting monsters. There's no way around the trauma. You need to learn about them, really learn. Biology, behavior patterns, social structures. Yeah, they have those. Higher ones can organize, plan, set traps. They learn from every encounter. Adapt to our tactics. Every time we kill one, the others get smarter. Some hunt alone, some in pairs, some in packs. Each type needs different tactics. Solo hunters are usually territorial, stick to their grounds, follow patterns. Pack hunters are nomadic, more aggressive. They're the ones that cause mass disappearances. You need to learn their signs. 8-foot-high claw marks mean territory marking. Buried kills mean they're settling in for a long stay. Fresh tracks with no prints leading to them means they're hunting you. Documentation is crucial, not for glory, for survival. Every encounter, every sign, every detail gets recorded. Because patterns emerge over time, things you wouldn't notice without data. Other hunters need to know what you know, in case you don't make it back. Here's the really hard part, learning when to walk away. Some situations are unwinnable. Better to back off, regroup, come back better prepared. Your ego can get you killed in this work. Pride isn't worth dying for. You need a network, other hunters, people who know the score. Not many of us out there, but we look out for each other. Share information, resources, backup when needed. But trust is earned. Hard to earn. If you're still reading, still thinking about this life, here's what you do. Start with basic wilderness survival. Master it. Then advanced tracking. Then weapons training, real training, not weekend warrior stuff. Learn about ballistics, about shot placement, about working in low light. Study animal behavior, all kinds of animals. Because you need to know what's normal before you can spot what isn't. Learn about weather patterns, about how terrain affects movement, about how to read sign that's days old. Get in shape. Not gym shape, functional shape. Need to be able to move heavy gear over rough terrain for days. Need to be able to function on minimal sleep in bad weather, under stress. Most importantly, be sure, really sure. Because once you start down this road, your old life is over. No going back to normal. No pretending you don't know what's out there. Last thing, if you decide to do this, remember why we do it. Not for glory, not for thanks. We do it because somebody has to. Because there are things in the dark that need to be stopped, and most people aren't equipped to do it. We do it so others don't have to know these things exist. So they can keep believing the world is safe and simple. So they can sleep at night, not knowing what's watching from the shadows. That's what 15 years has taught me. That's what I'm passing on to you. Take it or leave it. But if you take it, understand what you're getting into. Because this life, it takes everything you've got, and then it asks for more. And that wraps up tonight's story. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did sharing it with you. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and join the community so you never miss a story. I'd love to hear what you thought, so drop a comment below and let me know. Until next time, stay safe, keep that glass full, and always sleep with the lights on.